Hello world! In this tutorial we're going to learn how to build a custom checkbox using CSS. We'll have a nice checkbox animating into the view. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing for more videos like this. Now let's get into it. Okay, so we have here a CodePen project with just a little code for the heading and then some styling for the body. And now we're going to create the checkbox. The checkbox and the label will be inside of a div. So input type of checkbox and the label, which will say checkbox or something, whatever you want to add here. And we're also going to need an ID for the input. Let's say checkbox, because we want to link the input with the label. So we can do that by adding an ID, and for the label that same name for attribute. So now if we're going to click on the label here, you can see that the input is triggered. So we can check it and uncheck it by clicking on the label and also on the input, like that. And let's add some classes. Class checkbox and class label. This is because we might have other inputs and other labels on the page, so we can style these directly in the CSS. Also, it's very important for the label to be after the input, and you'll see in a moment why. So let's do that. Let's start with the label. So on the label, we're going to have a bigger font size, like 20 pixels or so. And next, let's create a custom box on the labels before. So label before, and we'll have a box of width 20 pixels and height 20 pixels. We're going to need to add a content. It can be an empty string for now. And let's add the background color, white, and the border around it. Border 2 pixels solid, DDD. So now we can see that something appeared here. Let's make it display inline blocks so we can see it. Okay, so there's our box. We can add a border radius, 5 pixels. Now we can see that it's nicely rounded there. And also, if we click it, it triggers our checkbox. One thing we'll have to do is to position it absolute, so we can place it wherever we want. So let's do that. Position absolute, and we'll have left be minus 30 pixels. And you see that it disappeared. So to bring it back, we need to add position relative on its parent. So now it nicely appeared here where we want it. It covers the checkbox, so let's move the checkbox a little bit so we can see it triggered. We have the checkbox class, and also we can position it absolute and have left 100 pixels because it will be relative to the window. We just want to see that it triggers, so this is why we keep it in the viewport. But at the end we're going to set it to something like minus 9999 pixels, so it will go away. But for now let's keep it in the viewport. Next, let's create that check mark. So for that we're going to do pretty much the same, but on the after. But we'll have some changes. First, we need to add a check entity. And for that, there is a code we can use inside the content. And we can see that the check appeared. Next, we don't need a background color or a border. Also, we can get rid of the width and height. We just changed the left to minus 25 pixels. So now you can see that it's there in the middle. But it doesn't do much. Let's also change the color to be something like a green color. Okay, the next bit is the most important. We have to find a way to see when the input is checked or not. And for that we have the checked selector. So we can add that to the checkbox. So for our input, we have the checked selector, and this pretty much says if it checked or not. Next, we can target the sibling selector, and we're going to target the label. So with this sign, it will say target all the labels after the checkbox, and we're going to target this after selector. So after. It's a longer selector, but basically says that if the checkbox is checked, find the sibling selector, the label, and target the after selector on the label. And here we can do something. So what we want to do here, initially want the check mark to be hidden, so when it's unchecked. So to do that, we can set the transform here to scale 0. So now our check mark disappeared. And then inside this selector, we can bring it back using transform scale 1. like that. And now if we're going to check the checkbox, we can see that our check mark appeared. And also, because the label is linked with the checkbox, we can click here on this box to uncheck and check the checkbox. So we don't need to see the checkbox anymore. Let's move it out of viewport with that very long pixel value. That's it. We have a custom checkbox. We can add what kind of entity we want here. Also, we can add an animation using transition. We're going to target the transform property, and for 0.2 seconds, linear transition. And now if we click it, you can see that it animates. And maybe let's add a cursor pointer to the label so we can see the cursor changing when we hover over it. And now you have a custom checkbox using CSS and a little bit of animation. We use the before and after pseudo elements to create the box and the check. But you can have what kind of tag elements you want inside the label and you can target them. So you can create the box and the checkbox inside the label directly. Something like, I don't know, maybe you'll have a div here with the class of box, and inside it you might have an icon with a class of, I don't know, font awesome with a FA check or something like that. So this will be like our before selector, and this will be like our after selector. In this tutorial we used the after and the before selector because we don't have to create other elements on the screen. So that's pretty much it for this tutorial. If you liked it, give it a like, subscribe if you want to receive notifications when I upload the next tutorial, and I'll see you there. Have a good day. Bye.